I'm sorry, folks. I'm not doing anything like what I said I was going to do this week. I was going to continue my old boring autobiography, but I started getting obsessed on something from my memory from back home. I started getting obsessed about it last week, and then early this week I said, "No, I'm going to recreate. I'm going to sit down. I am a sketch artist, and I can do this." Okay, in every I would like to believe all around the world, in every child's hometown, there is an obligatory haunted house. Ours was called Buzzard's Roost, and it sat at the top of, it sat high on Fairfield Hill, which was a really beautiful residential thoroughfare. It was a major traffic artery, but it was also a beautiful, it had a lot of really pretty houses on it that a lot of thought had gone into. And almost all of them over 100 years old, like almost all of them. So this was called Buzzard's Roost, and it had been a rooming house for many years, and it had just gone kind of like downhill, 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 until it was no longer habitable. And so the first time I remember seeing it was with my parents in the car, and my dad said, look how seedy all those people are sitting on the porch at Buzzard's Roost. It's really gone downhill. It used to be quite a nice place. And that's all I remember. But I did look at the house and I thought, ooh, that's a scary looking old house. I don't know. So the next time I remember giving it any thought at all was coming back from Louisville in 1972. I know it was 1972, and I figure out, like, that's not important, but it was 72, right? I'm 11. We pull over. I mean, my mom says, now, when you get to Buzzard Roost, slow down, Sam. I never get to see anything you're talking about. I guess he had said something about it going out of town. I don't know. Not only did he pulled over. It was still daylight. It must have been like 5:30, 6 o'clock on summer afternoon. Still plenty of daylight. And he said, well, hey, let's just go in and see. The front door's wide open. And the front door was wide open. And Mom said, I don't think... And he said, oh, hell, Marie, come on. So we all went in. And the house was... It didn't have a... It was not furnished. It was not what you thought. You'd think you'd go in and be couches and old grandfather clocks and statues covered with white cloths to keep the dust off and chandelier. No, it wasn't. It wasn't like that. It was really pretty sparse, and it looked like everybody had just kind of hit the dusty trail and just moved out. There were just a few stray things left behind by people. We went up into a second floor bedroom, and it was very touching to me because the mantelpiece had been decorated by someone with that old blue foil Christmas wrapping paper. It still had its little Christmas decorations that they had put up for Christmas. And anyway, Mom, there were a few things in this room. That was there. There wasn't any real furniture in there, but there were papers scattered all around the floor. And Mom said, that's my daddy's handwriting. She looked. She said, this is a bill. This is Christine. This is where Christine Webb lived, and this is where Christine Webb died, and she died owing my daddy money. Wow, how sad. So anyway, we left. That was 72. So we'll hop on up to 1975. I'm running around with a group of really fun boys. We go places we want to go. We explore. We often, make things better. We could be a little rough and tumble, but I'll tell you what, we were also members of the young Northeast Nelson County Historical Society, and we were very interested in that. So in 1975, our organization was going to put a float in the annual Bloomfield Tobacco Festival, and the floats at that time were built on tobacco wagons, and they were always built at the big tobacco warehouse, Big Burley, that sat like up high. It sat... it sat like maybe a half block up. It wasn't blocked, but it sat, a few spaces up from Buzzard's Roost. And so there was nothing in that town we hadn't explored. We'd been under the town, through the town, everywhere in the town that we could be. We wanted to know that town. And so, of course, we finally made our way up to Buzzard's Roost, where I had been before. I've been here before, and I'll tell you what I think. So it was Timmy, Roddy, Lonnie, and me, and maybe Billy Howard. And the thing was, Timmy and Roddy and Billy Howard all knew their shit about things like construction and maintenance and repairs and building materials. They all really knew what they were talking about. So anyway, the thing is, we go in 1975, and it's a little different situation. Suddenly, the house is kind of like got shit laying around. It's like weird. It's like somebody had brought some kind of cabinetry that had been torn out of something. It was there. It was in the entrance hall, and then like back there was giant box of old restaurant china. You remember the heavy, thick stuff with the little green stripe around it? Great big box of that stuff. I'm looking around at stuff like, oh, this is cool. Not for a second thinking we're going to take. I didn't think I was going to take anything. No, I wasn't. It was just, this doesn't make sense. Why is this here now and it wasn't here 3 years ago? But we went into that same room upstairs because I said, I got to show you all this. It looks so sad. It's like she decorated Christmas. We went in that room this time. There was a big chrome rolling rack that had all of these really cool vintage clothes hanging on it. It wasn't like, oh, some old woman died and left her dresses here. There was a Bloomfield Letterman's jacket. There were 2 or 3 beautiful knit prom dresses from like the 1950s, and there were men's suits and other women's dresses and things, and military uniforms, and it was like, this is kind of I didn't know it at the time, but what I was thinking was, that's kind of a curated collection there in that room. But anyway, so, after that, we found, after we had been in, and okay, this is the thing too, at the time, we were really secretive. I mean, we told our friends and stuff, but we were sneaking around. What we didn't know was like every other cool kid in town had been in that house as much as we had. It was not an original idea that we go into Buzzard's Roost, because like I said, it was the obligatory haunted house of our little town. So in 1975, we were putting a float in the back festival, and we needed a casket or we were reenacting a scene from 1820, and we needed a coffin, right? And so Bill, Tim, and Roddy said, no deal. We just got to have some lumber. We can build you a casket any kind you want. I'm like, yay! And I said, well, where's the? They go, we got to go forage for the wood. We don't know where we're gonna come up with it, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. They left us at the warehouse working on the float. They were back in 40 minutes, and they weren't carrying wood. They were carrying the creepiest looking casket you ever saw in your life, honey. It was like upholstered outside, but like with real gauzy, like mummy-like, and it was all deteriorated like Miss Havisham's stuff. And it like the top of it was like padded and upholstered. It was just like, this is an actual this is an actual coffin. It turned out, I said, where did you get this? They went into Buzzard's Roost because they thought they might find a piece of something that they could cut up and make a casket out of, and they found this. What it turned out to be was somebody at Buzzard's Roost at some point had decided to make an old banana crate into a divan, which is a sofa with no back. And so they had upholstered this. They had upholstered it, and they had padded the top. And I could see when it was young, it was probably, quite an attractive piece. They had put handles on each end so that they could move it. So they used it like a storage divan in their home, and we used it as the Beecham coffin for the romantic tragedy float. And listen, when they brought it, so we're going to have to alter it a little bit for the float, because it can't just look this way, because the rest of the float's got like color theme and stuff. So we're going to alter it, but then we're going to put it back. We're going to take it back down there and put it back. And so we did. We altered it. I altered it. It looked great, right? It looked great. Anyway, we didn't take it and put it back. It was like, when you're like 14 and you're cool and kind of groovy, and you've got access to a casket that you used in a parade, you kind of have to take that home and put it in your room and be that good little kid with a coffin in your room for about a year. It was a funny thing because that thing, I did eventually go, okay, got to get rid of this. And I don't know what, I was like, I'm either going to have to completely redo this or get rid of it. So I was ripping all the fabric and everything off the outside, and I ripped the padding off the top and came across 2 intact Courier Journal or Louisville Times from 1922. And the funny papers with the Katzenjammer kids it was pretty spectacular. I'm like, somebody did this. Somebody got handy in 1922. So, anyway, I think that piece ended up, my dad adopted it and turned it into a junk box and put it out behind the shed in our backyard to hold junk. He didn't feel like sparing the energy to put in the actual building. It was just stuff, the kind of good stuff, but nothing that warranted being actually stored. It's probably still sitting there. Anyway, okay, so I'm talking about Buzzard's Roost. Well, I'm going to explain all the stuff that was in Buzzard's Roost. In 1973, okay, in our hometown, there had been a building that had been there since like the 1890s, downtown, a commercial building. It had been a dry goods store. It had been in the 40s and 50s. Half of it had been a beloved restaurant called the White Inn Cafe, and half of it had been the Dobbs Brothers department store. They had one in Bloomfield and one in Bardstown. Okay, so anyway, in my time, they were abandoned. I don't know. I have a feeling that both were abandoned by the early 60s because my mom was opening a beauty salon and she went to the auction of all of the contents of Dobbs Brothers, meaning the fixture sale, and she bought several things at that sale that she incorporated into our lives later. So the thing about White Inn was this charming little, it looked like the 30s, but I think it was really like 1940. It might have been 38 when Vernon Long created it and opened it. But then he went to war, see. So then he went to war, so I think he either sold it or leased it to Grace John. Anyway, I don't need to be going there. I'm telling you, the White Inn was a place that everybody loved, and everybody at that age still talks about. It was the haunt. People went there. It had a beer garden in the back. You could go in the back and drink beer out. And I thought, when my daddy walked me back there and said, this was a beer garden, I was like, things like that don't even exist in the world. Did it have fountains with beer? No, it was just called a beer garden. It was just like a patio. You could sit out there and drink in the back as long as you didn't come around front. Anyway, this place closed, and I want to guess it closed in probably 62, 63. And they just turned the lock and just walked out. And it sat there completely intact for over 10 years. And when I discovered it, I couldn't get enough because it was so... Just looking in the windows, I mean, it still had those rainbow is good bread doors, screen doors there. But then when you looked in, everything looked like it was still an operating restaurant. There was gum in the gumball machine. There were china plates stacked up down at the other end that had been bussed down at the other end of the counter, and it had those little ice cream chairs, like twisted wire chairs, and it had those little booths that were wooden that had like bedposts on each one that had like hat and coat hooks on them. It was just so charming, and to just see it sitting there. I mean, it was all dusty, but it wasn't disintegrated or anything. So in 1973, our city bought that building from a lady named Bess Graham, who had raised a big brood of beloved children in Bloomfield, and she and her husband had been entrepreneurs in this way or that, and they had ended up owning a lot of property, and they had been the last actual owners of the White Inn. And then I hear that it was closed due to the illness of Mr. Graham. It was never reopened. It was never re-entered. Nobody ever went back in there. So Bess Graham, she lived in Bardstown with family, and she was old in the 70s, and she wasn't coming to Bloomfield. She hadn't been in Bloomfield for years. She just didn't. And in her mind, all of her property in Bloomfield was just sitting there, just like totally intact and totally just exactly as she left it. I mean, like, why aren't people renting the rooms at Buzzard's Roost anymore? I just don't get it. That had probably just become too much of a damn hassle. But anyway, the thing is, they bought the building where White Inn was from Bess Graham. So they had to do something with everything that Bess Graham had in her belongings that they didn't buy. They did not buy the contents of White Inn Cafe. No, they took the contents of White Inn and they hauled them up to Buzzard's Roost. And they bought the whole building. So I'm sure that there were things stored probably on the second floor that the Grahams had stored that were also hauled up to Buzzard's Roost for continued storage. Now, do you remember, I said the clothing rack? on the second floor that had this stellar vintage clothing. Bess Graham had children who were beautiful, popular athletes, and very popular. So there you go. That was the Letterman jacket. It belonged to one of the Graham boys, and there 3 or 4 of those prom dresses, like Peggy and this was the cool clothes that had been kept to the whole family, and it was just there in Buzzard's Roost, where nobody from the family probably ever went again. So I'm about at the end. I'm about at the end of that, except to say this. The obsession has come and gone through the year. I don't know why. I don't believe it's spiritually or anything. I don't know. Just love old haunted houses and stuff and the history behind stuff. So the thing was, it was after 88. It was after 1988, I know, because I was clean and sober. My dad would come and get me and take me home from Lexington for the weekend, because I didn't have a car at the time. I just given my car up because I didn't have any trouble getting around to any place I ever worked in Lexington. It was just a big headache. We had really good public transit. And also, I'll tell you the truth, my customers love me so much, they'd come pick me up in the morning and take me home at night. And offer me to say, why don't you stay for supper? Because that's Kentucky people for you. Anyway, so where am I here? I'm wrapping this up. I promise you. Okay. So it's after 1988. My dad has picked me up. We're heading into Bloomfield. And as we're on the outskirts of town, I see in the distance a plume of black smoke. And it was the weirdest thing, because the night before, I had dreamed that we were in a car headed toward a big plume of smoke. Now, I don't know if it meant anything, but I was like, I swear to God, I dreamed about that last night. Daddy, what do you think that is? He said, hell, it's probably a tractor that burned up in a field or something. Well, it had been Buzzard's Roost. The fire department had gone up and burned it for safety issues, to get rid of it, because it had become really, really hazardous. And unknowingly, they had burned all the contents of the White Inn and all of the clothing that had belonged to the Graham children. And now I'm going to go, because I got to pee really bad, but I love you. Bye.